Welcome back to the Meta Deck Report for the month of December, a series where I cover the best, top-tier, most sweaty decks as played by the best players in Marvel Snap. So it's safe to say the month of December drastically changed the meta with the introduction of Pool 4 and 5 and all of the new cards, the Silver Surfer hitting the scene last week, and then nerfs to some of the top-tier cards in the game. Now, it is safe to say the meta's still wide open, but we've got 8 different decks for you to climb to infinite with this season in comparison to last month's 5, and we've got a lot to break down. So listen, typically, the meta top-tier decks assume that you have access to the top-end cards in Marvel Snap and have complete Pool 3 collections. And I am going to have the top-tier options, but assuming and knowing that most of you guys do not have access to all of the cards in the game, and most of you guys are far from that, I've reworked the entire way that I've done graphics on this channel, giving you replacement cards that aren't the foundational cards of the different decks so that you can pick and choose and see what you have in your collection to make these decks work for you. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move to the meta decks. Before we do that though, I want to highlight a couple of cards that I think got a huge boost in the month of December with the arrival of Pool 4 and 5. These are cards from Pool 1 and 3 that definitely went up in overall value. You guys can see from the graphic, we've got 3 cost cards, obviously all went up with tremendous value. Cards like Maximus, Brood, Cosmo went up even more with the Silver Surfer. Rogue and Lockjaw continue to climb up the meta scale. Mr. Negative finally got the boost he deserves because he's going to be working a lot better with the Silver Surfer. And then we've got cards like Sunspot from She-Hulk. Deathwave somehow continues to get even stronger from She-Hulk as well. The Leech, good God Almighty, we'll get back to him, but he'll be in plenty of decks this season. Quinjet and Moon Girl went up in value with the arrival of Thanos and some other cards into play. And then lastly, we have cards like Cerebro and Hazmat, all getting boosted up again by those Pool 4 and 5 cards. All right, with that being said, let's hop to the decks. Remember, these are in no particular order. While some are a little bit better than others, all are top tier, consistent, and competitive. And it'll come down to location, play, and all these are used by the top players in the game. So we kick this list off with one of my favorites, the Devil Dinosaur inspired decks. Now, if you remember, we had these on our last month's meta report, and they are here to stay because Devil Dinosaur remains one of the best cards in Marvel Snap. First of all, he can't be countered by Leader on turn 5, but there's also a lot of new cards from Pool 4 and 5 that definitely added even more value to the deck itself. Now, if you guys want a complete rundown of this deck, you can go look at last month's report. The core focus of the deck, again, remains on the 2 Devils. We have Daredevil and Professor X for control, and then the Devil Dinosaur for some mass power. Now, a lot of the new cards like Agent Coulson and Hill can both be added to the deck to continue to keep curve up and keep the hand size large. And with the addition of Silver Surfer, there's another version of the deck that's extremely strong. Essentially, you're going to load it up with a lot more 3-cost cards. And then we've got some Thanos synergy coming into play. Seriously, the Thanos version of the deck is absolutely insane. You're always going to have a full hand for the Devil Dinosaur. You've got some good pull, a lot of tech options. Guys, I recommend either of these. And if you don't have some of the high-end Pool 3 options, still run Devil Dinosaur. You can run him with She-Hulk. You can run him with a lot of different options. Great deck through and through. Now, our next deck is going to be On Reveal based, and guys, On Reveal has stayed within the meta since really the early days of Marvel Snap, and that's because the introduction of more powerful On Reveal cards keep coming to the game. We had Black Panther last season with the Arnim Zola combo. You can do the Black Panther option, but at the same time, you can also copy cards like Dr. Octopus, have a 20 power card, and then switch him over to another lane with Arnim Zola. But with that, at the same time, the reason On Reveal is just so consistent is there's so many different plug-and-play options. Let's say you don't have Sherry, which most of you guys probably don't. You can run a 3-cost heavy with Silver Surfer. Now, that's not going to be the best Silver Surfer deck, but the fact that On Reveal has so many different options and flexibility, it might be one that you want to play this season to infinite. Now, you can see down below the replacement cards that you can run, but as far as the token shop options go, you definitely want to go with Wong if you're going to want to run this deck with high success. If you're not all the way out of Pool 3, I would probably recommend against going for Sherry early. She's a great card, but you definitely want to continue to finish out your collection before you unlock her. But if you have Black Panther from last season, this is one to run. You can go control with Storm and get a little bit of a hybrid. make it your own. It's very competitive. Let's continue with another deck we saw in last month's report. Mr. Consistent, the Patriot is back, but it has some upgrades. Now, you can definitely use the deck that we had highlighted on last month's report. Definitely more friendly for the early Pool 3 players, and there's not a lot of cards that you need to have unlocked. Mystique is obviously the token shop unlock you want to aim for. However, this season, from the graphic, you can see the Silver Surfer version of the deck is the one that is shining a little bit more than most. Now, we've got cards like Wong in here to capitalize on White Tiger or Dr. Doom. Magic is great in the Patriot decks because typically more turns, the better. You can line it up to go ahead and play a huge combo, which is going to be a meta option of both Patriot followed by Mystique. And then you can do Silver Surfer followed by Absorbing Man, giving more bonuses to all the Patriot cards. And then on top of that, Patriot and Mystique themselves. Just loads of different options. And the Patriot decks are definitely one you're going to want to play. You're going to see a lot of leeches, and that's not going to be a big deal with the Patriot deck. And you're going to see other cards that can't quite hang with the Patriots' viability. Patriot decks are just the freaking jam. And if you want to know more about how to run them, I've got a full in-depth guide up above, and it'll teach you the basics and the main strategy. Now, by now, if you guys have been keeping up at all with the competitive scene in Marvel Snap, you know the deck tokened as Baero has been one of the top options in the game, largely due to Destroy cards having insane synergy and one of the best combos being the Death Wave combo. Now, obviously, it's going to make its way back into this list. It's still probably one of the top 2 options, but it got even better, and I can't freaking believe it because obviously the introduction of She-Hulk is going to bring some mass power, and it's just going to add and complement to the strategy that you'd be running with the Baero deck either way. I like to call it the 2 Bays deck, and you guys can see all the options here. We've added in Leader and She-Hulk. Those are both replaceable with the cards down below. Thanos is also an option that you can run. You can get some good card draw and then blow them all up with Killmonger to make sure you get a nice free death at the end of turn 6. And lastly, if you want to know any more about this deck, again, check up above. I got a She-Hulk deck guide that goes more into the strategy of this deck with some example games. Continuing on, we've got a new archetype introduced into the meta deck report with the card Zero in the Nuke deck. Now, the best part of this deck is the strategy is very simple, and there's a lot of different win conditions. Essentially, guys, you're going to be using Venom, Enchantress, Zero to go ahead and get rid of the negative ongoing abilities that cards like Red Skull and Typhoid Mary possess. But for you top-end players, if you really want to bring this deck to the next level, if you get Shuri, it's crazy. It's broken. Essentially, you could play Shuri followed by Red Skull and then Taskmaster for 2 super powerful lanes at the exact same time. Guys, altogether, the deck is extremely powerful, and I definitely recommend running it. Now, if you don't have Shuri, it's not the end of the world. You can rely on some other new cards like Luke Cage. You can have Hazmat in the deck after that. Arnim Zola can be replaced by Shuri to have some sort of a, Venom combination as a win condition as well. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty damn powerful. If you really want to use this deck, it takes some practice, but have fun. It's a banger. Now, in the November patch, we saw the Destroyer get a little bit of a nerf by having its power reduced by 1, and in Marvel Snap, even a small adjustment can change a card majorly. Now, it is not played as much as it was last season. However, I can tell you guys, the Destroyer is still a pretty solid deck. Null is just around the corner, and that's going to skyrocket this deck's overall value. For the most part, this deck is pretty damn solid. You can see the cards that I run here, along with some replacement options. The pros is that it's very easy to make this deck, even early in Pool 3. With the cons being that you're going to tell your opponent what you're playing. It's pretty obvious when you're setting this one up. However, even with the knowledge of them knowing you're playing this deck, it can be tough for them to match your overall power. All right, so we've got 3 more decks for you guys in this meta deck report, and we move on for you discard fans to a discard Lockjaw deck that's still ever present in the meta. Now we add addition of an alternate of a Silver Surfer discard deck, and things really start to get spicy, and I've used this deck a ton, so I've got a lot of practice on how it works. Now, if you want to know the core basics of discard and the Lockjaw deck, go ahead and check up above for the discard deck guide. You guys are going to get everything you need to know there as far as the basic tips, strategy, and cards to use. But with the Silver Surfer side of things, really, you're going to be limiting your discard options and replacing them with tons of other win conditions, while kind of leaning on the on-reveal side as well. You have Silver Surfer, an Absorbing Man, But at the same time, you can add in Odin Gambit for a complete location clear. This deck is insane, and if you really start to know when to switch what win condition you want to win with, you're going to win a lot of games. So the introduction of Pool 4 and 5 brought many new cards, and a lot of them have been slotted into these decks, but quite none of them do what Bast does. Now, you have to have Bast to make this deck work, so I'll be splitting this one amongst the Silver Sera negative deck as well, which is going to be all about Silver Surfer and Sera. However, let's take a look at what many are calling one of the best decks in the game currently. It's Bast in this crazy deck. Now, as you guys can see, all of these cards, they don't care if they get 3 power replaced by Bast. Only costing 1 energy is what makes it so crazy, and really you have cards that scale perfectly either way. You have Mojo, Brood, who's going to get the huge bonus from Silver Surfer. Rogue and Mystique are going to get large bonuses from the Surfer as well. Mr. Negative just makes everything even more crazy. If you don't pull Bast, you have that as a backup option. Iron Man, and lastly, Sera. And Sera combined with Mr. Negative, I mean, there's so much play on turn 6. It's the numerical style deck that just completely shuts down what the opponent wants to do. Now, again, the majority of you guys aren't going to have Bast, and because you have to, I'm going to have that as a replacement option for this next deck, and that is the Sera Silver Negative deck. And this is going to work a lot like your traditional Mr. Negative decks. However, you guys can tell we've got a lot more 3-cost cards to rely on. And then obviously we have very strong options like Wong, Absorbing Man to capitalize on Silver Surfer, Iron Man, and Sera if you pull Mr. Negative. And truly, the best part of this deck is there is some other options you can run. And if you want to know more about how to run the deck, go ahead and check up above for the Silver Surfer deck guide as I go into much more detail. But Mr. Negative is back in a major way, and that's largely in part to the Silver Surfer. Now, for our last deck on the meta deck report, it's a fun one, and it counters pretty much all the decks we've already talked about. It comes from a fellow content creator from Marvel Snap named DeraJn, and you guys can see down in the description below. Guys, this deck is insane. I like to call it Aliens Man. As you guys can see, it's all about claiming early initiative. You can use cards like Sunspot, Scorpion, and Lizard to get a high power out there early. Armor is going to be used as a tech card along with Shang-Chi. And then you've got cards like Thor and Maximus. Now, Maximus doesn't matter giving them 2 cards because the Leech is going to completely dissipate all those cards' abilities. And then you're going to take those non-useful cards and control them with Arrow. The mainstays in this deck are Arrow, Magneto, and then obviously Leader is going to be used as a huge win condition. Those are pretty much non-replaceable, but as for the others, you can plug and play with some replacements. I like cards like Wolfsbane for Maximus. You can change out a multiple of different options for Thor. Throw in Iceman if you want some more early disruption. Overall, this deck has gotten a 75% win rate, I believe, so far in testing. And again, it counters so many decks out there. Now, if you start to see this deck, I think Patriot does really well against it, and there's some other options as well. But you should have the majority of these cards, and you should test it out. After all, as you can see, the cards that you need to buy from the token shop would be Leader, Magneto, and Arrow. And if we're being honest, you'll be using those cards in other decks. You're going to have the rest of the cards, so go ahead and take it for a spin. This thing slaps. I'm pretty interested to see how long a card like Leech lasts in the meta, and you can plug him into a lot of these other decks like I mentioned today. I have him in the Ramp Sherry deck, for example. But at the same time, guys, I want to let you guys know with all of the new cards and Silver Surfer being very new, cards are going to seem a bit stronger at first. Silver Surfer is a great example. Once you start to identify what they're setting up, it's a lot easier to place your cards on the correct locations. But hopefully, guys, you enjoyed the December meta deck report. I might have another one coming in late December because there's so many new cards coming and even more on the way each and every week. Guys, if this video is something you enjoy and you like the new deck graphics, help me out by liking today's video. It helps a ton. But on top of that, we're back to around 75% of you guys are not subscribed who currently watch my content. And I definitely don't subscribe to every channel I watch, completely get it. But if you find yourself coming back again and again, it helps a lot if you take a second to click the red subscribe button. We've got all these going on my Twitter if you want access to these graphics and my Discord. Hopefully you guys enjoy. We've got a big week ahead. And until then, we'll see you on the next video and happy snapping.